Warning: this video references content intended only for adult viewers and includes mentions of nudity, pornography, and sexual assault. Viewer discretion is advised. And don't contact anyone in this video for any reason. Thank you. I was planning on making a video tearing into fandom for a while now, why it's bad for a lot of reasons, apart from being an ad-infested, anti-user website, but Mossbag went ahead and did the heavy lifting for me. Rather than recap everything he says in that video, go watch that, then come back, because that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's a great starting point for the issues I'm about to expand on. Okay, for those who still haven't watched it, here are the Spark Notes so you can follow along. Excessive ads, horrible mobile experience, and their forking policy. This forking policy means, unlike every quality wiki host, Fandom will not delete their wiki if the community comes to a majority decision to host their wiki elsewhere. For a long time, it results in an old, abandoned wiki appearing above the up-to-date official wiki in search results. It makes it harder for viewers to find the information they're looking for, harms the growth of their competitors, and still provides Fandom with ad revenue, because views are views, even if the articles are outdated and vandalized. If you look at Fandom's policy on duplicate wikis on their site, this is exactly why they forbid them. But the policy suddenly changes when the wiki is a business competitor. Good wiki hosts delete the old wiki when you migrate because they have the community's best interest in mind, unlike the company literally called Fandom. This isn't some rare event. For example, all 49 of these wikis on screen have forked off of Fandom and suffer from this issue, with at least 100 more I haven't listed. Lots of wikis also never chose to use Fandom. The Dead Cells, Binding of Isaac Rebirth, Enter the Gungeon, and Terraria Calamity wiki are just a handful of many examples. They were originally hosted on Gamepedia. Fandom purchased Gamepedia and migrated everything to Fandom. This resulted in a drastically worse experience for editors and readers alike that these wikis never chose. Summary over. With that stated, why am I, of all people, making this video, you may ask? Well, I've worked on wikis for years now. Namely, the aforementioned Dead Cells wiki since 2019. I contributed to many articles, and I maintain one of our most popular pages, the biomap. In addition to that, I'm an administrator for the Fear and Hunger wiki as of winter 2022. I was specifically the person who instigated its fork from fandom to wiki.gg. I'm not as active of an editor on either of those wikis nowadays, but I still keep an eye on our Discord channels if anyone has questions or needs feedback. Now let's get into the stuff Mossbag didn't quite touch on. Fandom's rampant censorship. You might be confused to hear me say that. You've never heard of this happening. And yeah, that's part of the point. For context, I want to establish the amount of unseen work that goes into a wiki. The Fear and Hunger wiki has 467 articles as of writing, and Dead Cells has 551. Thousands of collective hours of work have gone into these. As impressive as an article count can be, it's only one indicator of how much work editors put into a wiki, especially if new media in the franchise or updates necessitate edits to existing pages. Some pages are larger than others. The items page for Fear and Hunger Termina isn't comparable to this lore page detailing a character mentioned once on a grave. Cleaning vandalism, adding plugins, the presentation of articles, as well as the website itself and graphics created for the wiki, these all take skills, collaboration, and time that readers will never fully comprehend. So now imagine you are an administrator for your wiki. It's been around since March of 2012. You've juggled all of these tasks for years. You go to the website and see this message plastered across every page.
This wiki will close in 2 weeks, Wednesday, November 24th.
This is what the Monster Girl Encyclopedia faced. And now I have to explain Monster Girls. To keep it as short and clean as possible, monster girls are humanoid women with beastly qualities. They require human semen to live, and it is not always obtained consensually. I know it's easy to laugh at the subject, but we need to acknowledge the precedent this set. Fandom, over a decade after its inception, modified its community creation policy on October 27, 2021 to state sex, fetishes, and other pornographic subjects are not permitted even if described in a non-explicit way. The deletion pop-up appeared on the wiki November 10, 2021. Prior to this update to the policy, only pornographic content was disallowed. which implies fandom does not see the MGE franchise as pornographic, but it does see it as a fetish. It doesn't matter if your wiki discusses the content objectively and refrains from excessive detail of graphic scenes, even if it is marked with content warnings or behind an 18+ only agreement. Fandom's policy states they can remove it. It's worse than you think, too. None of the staff at the MGE wiki were contacted ahead of time. They were unaware their wiki was on the chopping block until that pop-up appeared. I couldn't find any emails I received from Fandom announcing updates to their content policies at this time either. Hi, post-production Connor here. They sort of announced it in August, but it was at the bottom of a very long post discussing the rebranding of Fandom. The second paragraph of the last section reads,
Our community safety team will introduce a more robust community creation policy. Topics that divide us as fans, as community, or just as people do not belong on our platform. Fandom has already been stricter with divisive content the last few years, and this relaunch just felt like the right time to codify this more clearly.
The statement uses far too many words to say nothing. Divisive could mean anything, and the information indicating you will permanently delete some communities should go at the start rather than under the essay explaining why fandom looks different, so I very much understand why the MGE wiki was caught off guard. A week after the pop-up appeared, communications were opened up to the community by a single fandom community support member. This employee was predictably harassed to no end by a few nasty users and forced to respond politely, even on their weekends off. Their social medias were found and flooded with harassment, all because Fandom did not give their employee an unidentifiable support account when tasked with breaking the devastating news to a community and answering the ensuing questions. So it should be obvious why I'm not showing their name in this video. They were the messenger, not the one making the decisions. Please leave them alone. They were very polite and responsive. In these accounts, the staff members said,
We, Fandom, supply a download of the text for you to use. We can't give a download of the images, but you may find that your new host has a method of copying those.
Mirahis, the only other wiki host MGE could have moved to, does not have a way of copying those, because Fandom's terms of use does not permit the automated scraping of images. The only way to comply with these terms is by manually downloading the images, and Mirahis doesn't have the manpower for this as it is run by volunteers. This means Fandom gave the MGE wiki 2 weeks to manually download 14,683 images in order to migrate. It's likely the MGE wiki automated this anyways, but Fandom shouldn't assume their users will break their terms of service. But maybe this was a one-off thing. I wanted another account. So I contacted another user from a wiki that was removed from Fandom in November of 2018. Watermaiden, the individual responsible for the comprehensive anime bassines wiki. Fandom was very much aware of the wiki's presence, as staff would regularly check in to delete images they deemed explicit, and they responded to queries from Watermaiden and her team on the matter. By extension, this implies Fandom staff saw no underlying issues with the wiki itself, otherwise they would have deleted it at this point. This was definitive proof the wiki was not surviving by flying under the radar. In response to images being deleted, Watermaiden created Wikia censor bars to show content she didn't want to omit entirely, and put a notice on impacted pages to clarify this was not her decision, and noted where it could be viewed freely. But since Fandom has never allowed links to alternative wikis, she could only mention it by name. It's worth noting she placed these pages under a censored articles category on the wiki, which reached 272 articles, and that the entire wiki was placed behind an 18+ warning around this time. Fandom broke the news to Watermaiden on November 16, 2018, that the wiki was scheduled to be removed. They never cited a particular part of the policy. I found no evidence of Fandom's terms of service becoming any stricter at this time, but despite that, image deletions have become more aggressive. For example, butts were previously seen as acceptable, but at some point, new images containing them were deleted. As a result of this, I can't help but see this as a case of double jeopardy. Fandom found the anime bathscene wiki did not fall under a pornographic wiki for many years, but in November of 2018, decided it is, actually. And my suspicion was correct based on the message Fandom staff left upon closing the wiki. It explained Fandom was reviewing what it saw as fetish and ecchi wikis, which included the anime bathscene wiki. Watermaiden has never considered it pornographic and maintains this stance today despite the wiki's independence. It's important to remember that this was in 2018. The The community creation policy only specified pornography was disallowed at this time, not fetishes and sex, which wouldn't be clarified for 3 years. Fandom did cite childlike characters being present on the wiki as an issue, but a discussion should have taken place on such content instead of throwing out a 9-year-old wiki. The message concluded with an apology for the change in policy, indicating Fandom had permitted the wiki in the past and are now reverting their decision after re-reviewing the wiki. Despite this, the staff did offer extra time for Water Maiden to migrate if she needed it, and were generally communicative with her, unlike the MGE wiki years later. It also gives us an idea why Fandom can't provide wiki images. Vague legal reasons I can't hope to pinpoint because I anal. Wait. Water Maiden detailed the consequences of having to download the images herself. For reference, the anime bath scene wiki had just under 50,000 images at this time.
The images were not provided. We had to back up all the images ahead of time manually. I always properly organized and saved everything I contributed, but the rest of the wiki's users' contributions weren't backed up. Vipitbro, who was my most active helper back on that version of the wiki, managed to get help from some people on 8chan to dump the entire wiki's images into a 15GB folder on Mega that I was able to retrieve. Everything that was posted back on the Fandom's version of the anime bath scene wiki, I still currently have backed up. Transferring all those pages was the only thing I was able to do instantaneously. I am, still to this day, slowly updating and reloading all those images from that era.
So the lack of warning given to the MGE wiki likely caused a great deal of issues when migrating their images. I did attempt to reach out to the folks at the MGE wiki for information on their migration process, but my efforts were fruitless. To Fandom's credit, they did delay the deletion of the MGE wiki to December 13th in the ensuing chaos. I cannot verify if this was requested by one of MGE wiki's staff, or if it was a courtesy from Fandom. What's peculiar is that not every suggestive wiki was removed at this time. Monster Musume, aka the Daily Life with a Monster Girl wiki, is still around to this day. However, they've had to remove all female-presenting nipples, as well as some of the more drastic imagery. I do not know the specifics of said imagery, but an admin at the time described it as not safe for work. And looking at the images on the wiki today, a significant portion have been censored due to female-presenting nipples. The Fandom representative responsible for communications with the MGE wiki as it was shut down clarified that
the Monster Musume wiki has been reviewed and won't be removed.
From my understanding, the distinction is that the Monster Musume wiki does not explicitly show sex in the sense you do not see naughty bits doing the stuff. The MGE wiki very much does this. The same representative went on to explain,
"We are not removing all wikis that mention sex. For example, Game of Thrones and Law & Order Special Victims Unit both contain content that shows or mentions sex, but in both cases the wiki isn't about sex. It isn't the purpose or the overall focus of the wiki or its topic, and the shows do not show the sexual content at a pornographic level."
But then why was the Agent Aika wiki removed? While it is true the series stuffs fan service into every shot imaginable, the story isn't about sex, fetishes, or other pornographic subjects. It's about an agent saving the world. And regardless of how much fan service there is, there are definitely no naughty bits doing the stuff. Hundreds of anime and manga contain fan service, many of which have wikis on Fandom. So cracking down on Agent Aika in particular creates another slippery slope of how much fan service is too much. 50 Shades of Grey is still on Fandom, and that undisputably showcases fetishized sexual acts in the books and films as part of the story. The books put in little to no effort to make the descriptions safe for work, whereas the films do obscure the naughty bits, further complicating the precedent they set. Fandom's terminology implies that the nature of the work a wiki is based on is the deciding factor. And no matter how you cut it, 50 Shades of Grey is about BDSM sex in some capacity. The cynic in me can't help but look at the staggering financial success the franchise has seen over the years, generating over $1 billion in its lifetime, and I wonder if that influenced the decision to retain it while pushing out the comparatively obscure Monster Girl wikis. But, of course, that is my cynical speculation. What I can be certain of is this know it when I see it attitude applied to sexual content on the site makes the future of many wikis uncertain at best. Especially when much of the content already has to be censored in some capacity, and again runs into inconsistent rulings. such as the notion of censoring female-presenting nipples, which for one is sexist and opens a nasty can of worms with gender identities. I regrettably verified Monster Musume's art does not depict men with nipples, but looking at the Gurren Lagann wiki, Kamina's breathtaking form is unaltered, so this confirms that it's only female-presenting nipples being censored. And to clarify, I am saying female-presenting nipples as it highlights the messy precedent it sets, since fandom has tried to establish itself as a trans ally. What happens if someone assigned female at birth transitions and either has yet to undergo top surgery or chooses not to? Does this mean fandom requires trans mask nipples be censored, despite them qualifying for male-presenting in terms of identity? Then why aren't all male nipples censored? Or what if someone AFAB finds they're non-binary? What if someone assigned male at birth transitions? When is a nipple too female-presenting? And what if that woman doesn't take estrogen? Because you're all valid. So why do we have to censor nipples at all if fandom says we shouldn't assume people's genders or permit transphobia? The policies contradict one another because they uphold cisgendered ideals of masculine and feminine bodies. Selectively censoring a sex's nipples while championing trans rights is trying to have their cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. And why does classical art not have to be censored while modern art does? The Fandom Animal Crossing wiki is able to showcase the Venus de Milo and David just fine. Meanwhile, I can tell you from first-hand experience with Fear and Hunger that fandom automatically deletes any penis you upload. So now we're being selective with what genitals are allowed? But I'm getting off track. To reiterate, I am not upset that fandom doesn't want porn on their platform. The content discussed in this video was permitted for years and implicitly deemed as non-pornographic by fandom for most of that time. Changes to fandom's content policies were poorly communicated, had no room for feedback, rulings were applied inconsistently, and there was little to no explanation behind any of their decisions. Because fandom isn't obligated to tell you where your wiki violates the terms of service. They don't need to be consistent with their applications, and they don't even need a reason, because ultimately, they reserve the right to remove or modify any wiki they see fit. Sure, you can argue that as long as a wiki doesn't fall under any of these incredibly vague subjects, it's fine, but it's not. That was definitely not the case for the LGBT wikis. This is how fandom saw the events that transpired.
We are excited to introduce LGBTQIA+, a new wiki community that will serve as the home for all information about sexuality and gender identity. This will be a consolidated version of the former wiki pages, and at launch will include just the main articles needed to help people who are searching for information. We worked closely with a number of LGBTQIA+ individuals and allies as we developed this wiki, and to ensure the most accurate information continues to live on this wiki, there will be an emphasis on sourcing articles. For example, as content is added to this wiki, only official terms that are recognized by people working on LGBTQIA+ issues will be approved. One exception to the merge is the Easy Gender Wiki, which will host articles outlining specific genders, orientations, and pronouns, including pages of xenogenders from other wikis. The main LGBTQIA+ wiki will have a page on xenogenders with examples, but not the thousands of pages as on other wikis.
This is how the community saw what transpired. Prior to the merge, there were over 10,000 articles across the various LGBT wikis on fandom. Immediately following this, there was one wiki with 139 articles. Confusingly, this means there is a huge difference when I say LGBT wiki and LGBTQIA+ wiki. The LGBT wiki was the largest of the deleted wikis with around 7,000 articles, and it included all manner of LGBT information, including xenogenders. And as a disclaimer, the LGBT wiki has been accused of racism and lesbophobia in some articles. I'm not trying to excuse that, but to my knowledge, fandom never once cited this as a reason for deleting articles, so I don't think it's a relevant factor. Meanwhile, the LGBTQIA+ wiki is fandom's creation, and is what remains after fandom decimated all LGBT wikis on the site, minus Easy Gender, with their merge. The past wikis were not asked about the possibility of a merge, or even aware that it was being considered before it was set in motion. I can't tell you how many wikis existed previously, because most were not archived, with the main exception being the LGBT wiki. The content on the LGBTQIA+ wiki has to meet a much narrower definition of what is deemed acceptable for the site, or as Fandom itself put it during the merge, only official terms that are recognized by people working on LGBTQIA+ issues will be approved. What makes a term official? What happens if there are new terms? Who are these people working on LGBTQIA+ issues? What are these issues? What is the work they're doing? Why does all the former wiki administration not fall under this umbrella despite working on their respective wikis for years? I'm not going to trust a corporation to answer any of these questions thoughtfully, more or less all of them. So why are they involving themselves in this to begin with? To Fandom's credit, they did change the official phrasing later, but the fact it was ever phrased in this manner is out of touch at best. Not ideal when this is part of the reason they're deleting 98% of the content on the subject. None of the staff of the deleted wikis were offered positions on the LGBTQIA+ wiki, so the community knows nothing about the new staff. Half of the new administration is employed by Fandom, and 100% of the former staff have been stripped of their rights and most of their contributions deleted. The term blur gender uses a now-deleted Fandom discussion page as the source. There is an Internet Archive copy of the page to help vouch for its validity, but the actual contents of what was said during the coining of the term have been permanently lost, even though the wiki is no longer affiliated with Fandom. And I know 10,000 articles is a lot, but the reason they existed prior to the merge was not because the authors intended for viewers to read all of them. It was to offer potential explanations for those trying to make sense of their experiences and the complicated feelings they have. Nobody reads every article on a wiki, and nobody writes them with that expectation. But all of the articles are still viewed. That's how a wiki works. It's a comprehensive encyclopedia to answer a series of specific questions. Deleting anything to simplify things misses the entire point. This is also why advertising wikis is virtually useless and only serves to waste precious screen space. People arrive with questions they want answered, then leave. Because wikis are not entertainment, they are information. Never once have I gone to the Enter the Gungeon wiki, scrolled to the bottom, seen the Dead by Daylight wiki advertised, and thought, wow, I want to read articles about this game I've never played. It's concerning that the company that owns most wikis doesn't understand any of this or chooses to ignore it. Also worth noting is that the LGBT wiki now has it worse than the wikis outright deleted from Fandom. There's no question what the official wiki is when you type in Monster Girl Encyclopedia Wiki. But if I type in LGBT wiki, there are now 2 wikis to choose from. Even though it appears as the first search result, which often isn't the case, Fandom's high SEO tends to put their wikis on top, the LGBT wiki has since rebranded to the LGBTQIA+ wiki. So you have to choose between the LGBTQIA+ wiki or the LGBTQIA+ fandom wiki. Now, I don't believe this argument for a second, but Fandom can point to the duplicate wikis and merging communities clause in their content policy regarding this incident. They can state that most of the information on the various wikis was redundant and/or harmed the SEO. So let's look at an example that doesn't violate any clause I can think of. In May of 2017, Fandom tried pushing portable info boxes heavily upon the Spanish Pokemon wiki. The community did not want to implement them, as it caused issues with galleries. They expressed this. Despite this, one of the Fandom staff went ahead and added portable info boxes to some pages. Upon seeing this, one of the wiki administrators reverted the change. They were subsequently stripped of their administrative privileges, with the reasoning given as interfering with Fandom network operations. There was no hesitation over this, despite the fact this editor had been an active, unpaid contributor for over a decade. And, of course, there was the Grimace Shake incident that Mossbag detailed in his video, which I'm not repeating, so you have to watch it. Time and time again, Fandom is meddled with communities for the worse, with varying degrees of severity. And many of the wikis I've discussed in this video couldn't have really done anything. For one, Fandom doesn't listen to anything after making up their minds. But these wikis only had a single other wiki host to migrate their work to: Mirahis. And look, while I love the fact that Mirahis is able to exist, it does have some issues. The unfortunate reality is that aspects of the site can go down for hours at a time. This includes articles becoming unavailable and images failing to display or upload. Due to its community-driven nature, it is only as good as people are willing to invest in it. This is a problem because it needs the support of people taking a chance on it before it can reach its full potential. It creates a negative feedback loop where it struggles to operate, and this makes viewers less likely to donate or volunteer, further compounding both issues. This feedback loop hit a boiling point in June of 2023 when it seemed like the platform would shut down entirely by October. Fortunately, past volunteers stepped up to the task of salvaging the site and enacted a rescue plan. Due to how recently this occurred, I cannot tell you with certainty that it will succeed. If you are able and willing to drop $1 on them, I will link to their donation page in the description. They are also in need of volunteers, so I will link to that beside it. There's a Discord link there too if you have questions. Without Mirahis, the wikis I have discussed in this video may have been lost forever. Fandom's monopoly would have even less competition, allowing it to harm its consumers with even fewer consequences. And it would result in advertisers having even more control over what content is allowed to exist on the internet. Because Mirahis relies exclusively on donations to exist, it has no ads. So even if you don't browse any Mirahis wikis, know that its existence still benefits us all. Before I wrap things up, I strongly suggest you download these two browser extensions. Wiki.gg Redirect. If you click on a fandom wiki and a wiki.gg alternative exists, it takes you to it. Indie Wiki Buddy. When you download this one, I suggest disabling the update notifications. Also, the extension takes the independent part of the name literally, so nothing wiki.gg is redirected to. With both extensions enabled, the official wiki is always easily accessible. If you're using an iPhone or can't use extensions for some reason, just adding GG after the wiki in your search result tends to work even for Mirahis wikis. Now let's talk about alternatives to fandom. Why are these other wiki hosts so much better? Well, first, don't pester any wikis or staff that are still on fandom. As I'm about to detail, there's a lot of nuance to each platform, and there are admittedly some things that fandom does well, even if I and many others personally believe the cons crush the pros. Plus, forking is a tricky process not everyone is up for. With that noted, here are my pros and cons of the various wiki hosts. This is based on my limited experience and opinions. I have no direct experience working on Mirahis or independent wikis, so please do more research if you're looking to fork or create a wiki. If you want to skip my more detailed thoughts on wiki hosts, go to this timecode. My first choice is wiki.gg. I have had nothing but an overwhelmingly positive experience on the platform. But it's not perfect. Some flaws with wiki.gg are as follows. The biggest is that wiki.gg is a gaming-centric host, so if your wiki is not dedicated to a video game, a mod, a speedrunning community, etc., you can't host your wiki there. Plus, some taboo stuff is still off limits. For example, the Fear and Hunger wiki was very nearly rejected for this reason. In one of the most awkward exchanges of my life, I had to confess the reasons why the game is rated adult only. I wanted to be confident in the future of the wiki on the platform, so I began the conversation with the absolute worst the game had to offer. That just so happens to include a cutscene of Kahara getting a fat, throbbing shoved up his by a prison guard. The scene is so infamous that the, description was one of our highest search terms on the wiki at one point. So I offered to omit this outlier of a scene entirely, which worked. Because I mean, the Final Fantasy VII wiki doesn't need to show you Sephiroth's 2-minute-long supernova attack in its entirety to tell you it's gonna do a lot of damage. The cutscene is superfluous to the result. And look, this is only one of 2 scenes in the game like this, and they're very avoidable, so please, it's not as bad as it sounds. Don't judge me, the games are great survival horror. I promise I'm not a creep! As of right now, wiki.gg has no visual editor by default. This makes editing a bit less accessible due to the intimidating look of source editing. Fortunately, the toolbar allows you to paste most formatting options, so you don't need to memorize them from an external help page. Kinda like Steam makes you do. Wiki admins can request an in-development visual editor be enabled, but it's quite buggy right now and is generally more inefficient than source editing. Hopefully this means the feature will be fleshed out in time, but I don't know what wiki.gg's plans are, so don't bank on that. There are still ads on wiki.gg, but since all you need to do is make an account and log in to get rid of them permanently, this is a minor issue at best. And if you don't, they consume less than half the resources ads on Fandom do, at least based on a quick test I did with a nearly identical wiki page on both platforms. The difference in memory usage decreases drastically if ads are disabled on both platforms, but wiki.gg is still slightly more efficient. But if you get past all that, wiki.gg easily has the best editor and reader experience. Pages load quickly, are highly customizable, ads aren't unreasonable, you can choose to have a navigational sidebar, pages work on mobile effortlessly. It's great! I already covered some pros and cons with Mirahis at timecode, but there's a bit more to note. Wikis on Mirahis need to be actively maintained, otherwise they're at risk of deletion. This is because of a lack of resources rather than malicious intent, but it is still a downside. In a similar vein, uploading images en masse is slower as all images on Mirahis require copyright information. Still, the site's lack of censorship and independence from advertisers are some really strong perks. They allow nearly any wiki to be hosted there free of charge, so support them if you can. Much of this applies to hosting a wiki independently, minus the free of charge bit. It can be the best option if maintained well, and if the members of the community can afford to pay out of pocket for it. But that's unfortunately not possible for a lot of us who are already sacrificing a lot of time just to contribute to articles. Having to pay, learn even more new skills, and actively run an entire website on top of writing articles isn't feasible for many unless you're a huge community like The Legend of Zelda or the Minecraft wiki. That or the creator or publisher of the franchise is willing to host it like the Stardew Valley wiki. Publishers, if you're listening, that'll get you huge brownie points. Definitely consult some independent wikis if you're considering the option. I can't say much more on the subject. Finally, there's a wiki host called Fextralife. I've not looked super extensively into it, as I only heard of it while making this part of the video, but I can't recommend it. Most of the wikis I saw hosted there were low-effort duplicates of the official ones. Many of them had not been edited for significant amounts of time, which can be easily spotted on the Fextralife homepage under recent wiki updates. The company responsible for the platform, Kimbuno Limited, operates out of Hong Kong, so I can't help but be even more skeptical due to the communicative and legislative barriers this introduces. I don't trust this platform much more than Fandom. In the making of this video, some developments have occurred. At the time of writing, Fandom has disabled all links to wiki.gg. This seems to be a result of genuine site vandalism. However, I imagine it stems from rogue actors dissatisfied with Fandom's platform, rather than an organized attack like Fandom claims. I do not condone vandalism. Instead, I suggest you put that energy towards improving the official wikis or advertising them in a manner that does not force some underpaid Fandom employee to clean it up. Regardless, I see this as a sign of an unhappy user base. Additionally, Fandom has quietly updated its forking policy to disallow the 2-week site-wide notice of the new official wiki. This makes it much harder for readers to discover that the Fandom wiki has been abandoned for good reason. Now, the best place to find such an announcement is a message on the homepage of the site, which for many wikis only works on desktop. Considering over half of a wiki's views often come from mobile, this is a bit worse than it seems. They also tweaked all the terminology to make it seem more like an amicable parting of ways, and instead of saying members of an existing community decide to fork, they now say groups of editors decide to set up a new forked wiki. This change in phrasing implies a minority of editors broke off to do their own thing, instead of the likely reality of it being a majority of the community overwhelmingly choosing to leave Fandom's platform. Other tweaks include making the terminology less passive and emphasizing the language that the Fandom wiki and its remaining editors will continue to thrive. Which in 99% of cases I've seen is blatantly false because nobody willingly works on a Fandom wiki unless it's the only option. And a few days later, Fandom has announced the removal of ads on former Gamepedia wikis when you're logged in. This is pretty good. The only way to get rid of ads previously on Fandom was either doing a bunch of edits This is still the case on the fandom wikis, but at least the communities who didn't choose the platform are harmed less. So it's still a meager effort if you ask me. And assign fandom listens if their wallets start bleeding. But considering this is following under-the-radar changes to their forking policy to harm their competitors and communities, this feels like 1 step forwards and 2 steps backwards. Especially since it happened over 2 years after Gamepedia wikis were merged into fandom, to get a bit closer to the quality they had prior. It's a drop in the bucket, basically. A key point we've seen across the examples in this video is a lack of dialogue between fandom and the communities it's deciding to police. Far too often, fandom decides to act before communicating, and even when it does, the decision's already been made. This prevents a meaningful conversation from taking place, and a compromise that benefits the communities and fandom from being achieved. More importantly, it results in irreparable damage to the impacted communities. Even if fandom improves, none of these communities that forked will ever trust them again. It also ensures fandom never has to clarify what is and isn't allowed on their website. They continually kick the can down to their future selves with vague phrasings on what content is permitted, and let a new batch of employees decide what it means. If the phrasing of the content policy is vague enough, then it's just a matter of time before the next employee at the helm interprets it differently. It's no big deal to fandom, but for the communities, it can endanger more than a decade's worth of work from countless individuals. Smaller degrees of content moderation, such as the presentation of articles with new features like portable info boxes, have further frustrated users and eroded what little trust they had in fandom to begin with. Editors do not expect or want their work to be interfered with by their host unless assistance is requested. This is how wiki.gg operates, and as a result, their staff are well respected. I hope this video clarified how much of fandom's logic is addled with contradictions, harms the editors providing tremendous amounts of unpaid labor, and hurts readers by extension. If you're an admin on a fandom wiki, consider going somewhere else if you can. Or, if you're wanting to start a wiki, please avoid fandom. The wiki literally cannot leave once it's there. The poor Minecraft wiki. Hopefully fandom addresses all of these issues, because there are merits to the platform. But I'm not counting on it right now. Thanks for watching.